Imagine for a moment that you're an expert musician, a virtuoso conductor standing before a world-class orchestra. You know the symphony by heart, every crescendo, every quiet pause. You raise your baton, the musicians lift their instruments, and on your downbeat, chaos. The violins start 3 beats late, the percussion comes in far too early, and the woodwinds seem to be playing an entirely different piece of music. The sounds are all there. The instruments are perfectly tuned. The musicians are incredibly talented, but the timing, the fundamental synchronization that turns noise into music, is off. You know the beautiful symphony that's supposed to be playing, but you can't make the orchestra produce it. This, in a metaphorical sense, is a glimpse into the world of dyslexia. It's not a problem of intelligence, vision, or effort. It's a neurological enigma, a different wiring of the brain that processes language in a unique and often challenging way. For centuries, we've misunderstood dyslexia, branding it as a learning disability synonymous with intellectual struggle, or boiling it down to the simplistic and largely inaccurate myth of seeing letters backward. But what if I told you that the story is infinitely more complex, more fascinating, and ultimately more hopeful than that? Welcome to English Plus Podcast, my friends. Today, we're journeying deep into the most intricate machine known to humanity, the brain. We're putting on our neuroscientist goggles to explore the neural mechanisms of dyslexia. We're moving beyond the classroom and into the cerebral cortex to understand what is truly happening when someone with dyslexia tries to read. This isn't just an academic exercise. Understanding the why and the how of dyslexia has profound implications for how we teach, how we parent, and how we support the estimated 1 in 10 people who navigate the world with this different cognitive wiring. So what are the burning questions we'll be tackling today? First, if it is not about seeing letters backward, what is it about? We'll explore the dominant theory, the phonological deficit hypothesis, and ask what it means when the brain struggles to connect sounds to symbols. Next, where in the brain does this happen? We'll take a tour of the brain's reading circuit, visiting key areas like the temporoparietal cortex or the occipitotemporal region, often called the brain's letterbox. We'll investigate how the activity and connectivity in these areas differ in dyslexic versus non-dyslexic brains. Is it a problem with the regions themselves or the highways of white matter that connect them? And perhaps most importantly, is the dyslexic brain static or is it changeable? We'll delve into the remarkable concept of neuroplasticity. Can targeted interventions actually remap these neural pathways? Can we, in essence, help that conductor get the orchestra playing in sync? This episode is your gateway to a deeper understanding. It's a primer, a conversation starter. True mastery of such a profound topic, of course, doesn't come from a single podcast episode, no matter how good it is. It comes from curiosity, from further reading, from engaging with the scientific literature and the lived experiences of those with dyslexia. Think of this as the first step on a fascinating journey, not the final destination. Shortcuts might give you a fleeting sense of knowledge, but dedicated learning builds a foundation that lasts a lifetime. So get comfortable and let's begin to unravel the beautiful, complex symphony of the reading brain. So let's start with a big one, the phonological deficit hypothesis. This is the heavyweight champion in the world of dyslexia theories. At its core, it suggests that the primary difficulty in dyslexia isn't visual, but auditory and linguistic. It's a struggle with phonological awareness, the ability to recognize and manipulate the individual sounds or phonemes in spoken language. Think about it. Before you can read the word cat, you need to implicitly understand that the spoken word cat is made up of 3 distinct sounds, k, a, and t. then your brain has to perform the magical trick of mapping those sounds to the specific visual symbols C, A, and T. This process feels automatic to most of us, almost instantaneous. We see the word and the meaning appears. But for a brain with dyslexic wiring, this mapping process is laborious and fraught with difficulty. The connection between the sound and the symbol is fuzzy, unreliable. Neuroimaging studies, particularly using functional magnetic resonance imaging or fMRI, have given us an incredible window into this process. When typical readers engage with text, a network of regions in the left hemisphere of the brain lights up like a Christmas tree. This network is a well-oiled machine. It includes the inferior frontal gyrus, which you can think of as the articulation and word analysis center, the temporoparietal cortex, the superanalyst that breaks words down into their sound structures, and the occipitotemporal cortex, also known as the visual word form area or the brain's letterbox, which is responsible for rapid, automatic recognition of familiar words. In individuals with dyslexia, studies consistently show a pattern of underactivation in the back of the brain, specifically in these crucial temporoparietal and occipitotemporal areas. The orchestra's woodwind and string sections, if you will, are playing too softly. The brain isn't as efficiently recruiting these specialized systems for decoding the visual information of letters and linking them to their corresponding sounds. To compensate, the dyslexic brain does something remarkable. It improvises. We often see overactivation in other areas, particularly in the inferior frontal gyrus. It's as if the brain, realizing the automatic word recognition system isn't coming online properly, forces its frontal lobe, the part responsible for effortful thinking and articulation, to work overtime. The conductor is essentially yelling at the brass section to play louder to cover for the quiet strings. This is why reading can be so exhausting for people with dyslexia. It's not a passive activity. It is an intense, mentally draining workout. Every word is a puzzle to be consciously and deliberately solved, rather than an image to be instantly recognized. Furthermore, it's not just about the activity within these regions, but the connections between them. Think of these brain regions as bustling cities. For them to work together, they need well-paved, high-speed highways. These highways in the brain are called white matter tracts. Research using a technique called diffusion tensor imaging, or DTI, suggests that in the dyslexic brain, the structural integrity of these white matter pathways connecting the language and visual processing centers can be different. The highways might be a bit more like winding country roads than direct interstates, making communication between the crucial brain regions slower and less efficient. The signal from the visual processing center to the sound processing center might be a little weaker or take a little longer, disrupting that seamless symphony of reading. And now, it's important to be nuanced here. While the phonological deficit is the most widely supported explanation, it's not the whole story. Science is rarely that neat. Other theories add fascinating layers to our understanding. For example, the magnocellular deficit theory suggests the issue might lie in a more fundamental visual processing pathway responsible for detecting rapid movement and changes in light, a skill crucial for scanning text quickly and keeping letters in the right order. Another, the cerebellar deficit theory, points to the cerebellum, a brain region traditionally associated with motor control, suggesting that difficulties with automatizing skills, including the motor-like skill of reading, could be a factor. Now, these theories aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. It is becoming increasingly clear that dyslexia is heterogeneous. It presents differently in different people. It's likely a complex interplay of genetic predispositions and neurological factors that affect various cognitive systems, with the phonological pathway being the most commonly and significantly impacted. And this brings us to the most empowering part of the story: neuroplasticity. For a long time, the brain was seen as a static organ. You were born with a certain wiring, and that was that. We now know this is profoundly untrue. The brain is incredibly malleable. It can reorganize itself and form new neural connections throughout life in response to experience and learning. This is the neurological basis of hope for dyslexia interventions. When individuals with dyslexia undergo intensive, evidence based reading interventions that focus explicitly on phonological awareness and phonics, we can see physical changes in the brain. Follow up fMRI scans have shown that after successful intervention, the patterns of brain activation begin to normalize. We see increased activation in those classic reading areas in the left hemisphere that were previously underactive. The brain, through targeted practice, can build those neural pathways, strengthening the connections and improving the efficiency of the reading circuit. It's like giving the orchestra's conductor a new score and the time to rehearse with each section individually until they can all play together in perfect harmony. Understanding these neural mechanisms is not about curing dyslexia. Dyslexia isn't a disease to be cured. It is a different way of processing information that comes with its own unique set of strengths, often in areas like spatial reasoning, creativity, and big picture thinking. Many of the world's most brilliant entrepreneurs, artists, and scientists are dyslexic. Their minds simply work differently. By understanding the neuroscience, we can demystify the struggle. We can replace shame and frustration with knowledge and strategy. We can design educational approaches that work with the brain's wiring, not against it. We provide tools like text-to-speech technology, audiobooks, and structured literacy programs not as crutches, but as legitimate and effective pathways to information and knowledge. We empower individuals by explaining that their brain isn't broken. It's just built for a different kind of music. And by doing so, we give them the chance to conduct their own magnificent, unique symphony. Well, my friends, that was, of course, in brief about dyslexia. I hope that serves as an introduction. And I hope that piques your curiosity to read more about it, to understand more about it, because of course, we just scratched the surface. Deep understanding takes time, and such deep topics can't be covered in half an hour or even 2 or 3 or 10 hours. If you really want to understand more about it, you will have to do it on your own. I hope I just paved the way for you to do that. But anyway, it's English Plus, so it's our time to focus on language. That's coming up. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. All right, that was a whirlwind tour of the dyslexic brain. As we went through all the complex science, we used some pretty specific and powerful vocabulary. The beauty of learning these words is that while they help us discuss a specific topic like neuroscience with more precision, they're also incredibly versatile and can elevate your everyday English. So let's break down about 10 of these words and phrases, explore what they really mean, and see how you can weave them into your own conversations. Now, let's start with a big one we used a lot, neuroplasticity. In the episode, we talked about it as the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. It's the neuro part, meaning related to the nerves and nervous system, combined with plasticity, which means being easily shaped or molded. So neuroplasticity is the quality of the brain being shapeable. You can use this in a more general sense to talk about personal growth. For example, you might say, I used to be terrible at public speaking, but I've been practicing a lot. It's amazing to experience the power of neuroplasticity firsthand. Well, I will have to admit, it's a sophisticated way of saying you can teach an old dog new tricks. All right, so that was about neuroplasticity. Next up is malleable. I use it to describe the brain as being malleable. It's a fantastic synonym for adaptable, flexible, or pliable. It comes from the Latin word for hammer, malleus, and originally referred to metal that could be hammered into shape. Now, while you can talk about the malleable nature of a child's brain, you can also use it for less scientific things. A plan can be malleable. For example, let's keep the weekend plans malleable in case the weather turns bad. A person's character can be described as malleable, which could be a positive, like they're open-minded, or a negative if they're easily influenced. So that was about malleable. Next, let's talk about phonological awareness. We got this phrase. Now, in our context, this was the crucial ability to recognize and work with the sounds in spoken language. Now, let's break it down. Phonological relates to the sound system of a language. So, it is an awareness of sounds. Now, while this term is quite specific to linguistics and psychology, the concept behind it, breaking something large down into its smallest components, is universal. You could adapt the idea and say, for example, to become a great chef, you need a kind of flavor awareness, the ability to taste a dish and identify every single herb and spice. Now, you're borrowing the structure of the phrase to create a powerful new description. So you see, it's not just about the phrases we learn, it's about how we can learn to use them similarly in other contexts, even if we change the wording of this phrase. All right, so that was about phonological awareness. Next, let's talk about cognitive. Well, this is a word you hear everywhere. Now, we talked about a different cognitive wiring. Cognitive simply means related to the process of thinking, knowing, remembering, and judging. It's the mental action of acquiring knowledge. So instead of just saying thinking skills, you can say cognitive abilities. You could say, after just a few hours of sleep, I find my cognitive functions are seriously impaired. It just sounds a bit more formal and precise than I can't think straight when I'm tired. Of course, you can use both, but of course, if you want to sound a bit more formal and precise, that's the most important thing, you can use cognitive instead. So that was about cognitive. Another great word is nuanced. Now, I said it's important to be nuanced here when we discuss different theories of dyslexia. A nuance is a subtle difference in meaning, expression, or sound. So a nuanced view is one that is not black and white. It appreciates the complexity and the subtle shades of gray. You can use this all the time. When a friend is complaining about a coworker, you might say, for example, I understand why you're upset, but it might be a more nuanced situation than it appears. It shows you're a thoughtful person who considers multiple perspectives. So that was about nuance. Next, let's talk about heterogeneous. Now, we describe dyslexia as being heterogeneous, meaning it presents differently in different people. The prefix hetero means different, and genus means kind. So it means of different kinds. Well, this is the opposite of homogeneous, where homo means same. Well, I know that it's kind of difficult in pronunciation because they're both spelled the same except for hetero and homo, of course. But for hetero, we pronounce the rest genius, and for homo, we pronounce the rest genus. So we say heterogeneous and homogeneous. So as I said, the opposite is homogeneous, where homo means the same. Well, coming back to heterogeneous, this is a fantastic word for academic and professional settings. You might describe the population of a city as culturally heterogeneous. Or you could say our customer base is not homogeneous. We need different marketing strategies for different groups. All right, so that was about heterogeneous and, in a way, homogeneous. Next, we got a phrase, fraught with difficulty. Now, I said the mapping of sounds to symbols is fraught with difficulty for someone with dyslexia. Fraught is an old word that means filled or loaded with something, usually something undesirable. So fraught with danger, fraught with tension, or fraught with problems. It's a very evocative phrase. Now, you could say, for example, his attempt to fix the plumbing himself was fraught with difficulty and ended with a call to a professional. It paints a very clear picture of a very challenging situation. All right, that was about fraught with difficulty. And remember that you can use it with other things, like we said, fraught with tension, fraught with danger, fraught with problems. Okay? Next, let's talk about another useful word, and this one is to demystify. Now, we said that understanding the neuroscience helps to demystify the struggle of dyslexia. To demystify something is to make a difficult or mysterious subject easier to understand. You remove the mystery. This is a great word for anyone who teaches, leads, or explains things. A good financial advisor demystifies the stock market for their clients. A good coach demystifies the complex plays for their team. You could say, for example, my goal with this presentation is to demystify the new software for everyone. Okay, that was about demystify. Now let's talk about compensate. We mentioned that the dyslexic brain will compensate for underactivation in some areas by overactivating others. To compensate is to reduce or counteract the effect of something undesirable by exerting an opposite force or effect. It's all about balance. We use this constantly. For example, we say, he's not a very fast runner, but he compensates with incredible endurance. Or, for example, I'm not great with details, so I compensate by being very organized with my notes and checklists. All right? So that's about compensate. And that brings me to the last word that I want to discuss with you, and this one is intervention. Now, we talked about reading interventions that can physically change the brain. An intervention is simply the action of becoming intentionally involved in a difficult situation in order to improve it or prevent it from getting worse. It sounds very formal, but it can be used in many contexts. A family might stage an intervention for a loved one. A government might plan an economic intervention to prevent a recession. On a smaller scale, you might say, for example, I saw the two kids arguing and I knew a little parental intervention was needed before it escalated. So there you have it, 10 powerful words and phrases. And now, let's move to our speaking section. Well, today's speaking skill is about the power of the metaphor. Now, you notice in our episode, I didn't just list facts. I used the metaphor of an orchestra and a conductor to explain the complex coordination required for reading. I talked about brain pathways as highways. This isn't just to sound poetic. Metaphors are a cognitive shortcut. They take a new, complex idea and connect it to something the listener already understands. It builds an instant bridge of understanding. When you're explaining something complex, whether it's your job, a hobby, or a scientific concept, your listener is trying to build a mental model. If you just give them dry facts, they have to build that model from scratch. But if you give them a metaphor, you hand them a pre-built frame. So here's your challenge for this week. I want you to practice this skill. First, pick a topic you know very well, but one that is complex for an outsider. It could be the process of coding a simple application, the rules of a complex board game, a concept from your work, or even the emotional journey of moving to a new country. Your assignment is to explain that topic to a friend or family member, but with a specific constraint. You must create and use at least one central metaphor to explain it. Don't just throw in a simile like, it's like something. No, try to build a core metaphor, like my orchestra example. Maybe coding is like building with Legos, where each piece of code is a specific brick. Maybe navigating office politics is like playing a game of chess. I don't know, these are just examples. So the goal is to see how your explanation changes. Does it make it easier for the other person to understand? Does it make it more engaging for you to explain? Pay attention to their reaction. Do they start using your metaphor back to you? Well, that's a sign it's working. This simple exercise will train your brain to think more creatively and will make you a far more compelling and effective speaker, so give it a try. And that's for our speaking section, my friends. Now, before we finish, I got some discussion questions for you. Now, we've journeyed through the intricate landscape of the brain, and now it's time to bring the conversation to you. So here are a few questions to get you thinking and discussing. Now, I'd love to see your thoughts and experiences shared in the comment section on the website, or on my Patreon page, of course. So let me start with the first question. How does understanding the neural basis of dyslexia change our perception of intelligence and effort in an educational setting? Well, think about this. If reading difficulty is a matter of brain wiring rather than laziness or low IQ, how should that influence grading? Should we reevaluate timed exams or the emphasis on written essays versus other forms of demonstrating knowledge? Discuss the line between providing necessary accommodations and maintaining academic rigor. My next question is, many successful entrepreneurs and artists are dyslexic. What potential cognitive strengths might be associated with this different brain wiring? Now consider the idea that the brain is compensating. If it struggles with linear, detail-oriented processing like decoding text, perhaps it strengthens other areas. Discuss the potential for enhanced creativity, problem-solving, spatial reasoning, or big-picture thinking. Do you know anyone who fits this profile? Well, think about that. And now let's move to the next question. We mentioned neuroplasticity and the power of interventions. What is the role of early identification and intervention in shaping a child's academic and emotional future? I want you to delve into the emotional side of this. What's the psychological impact on a child who struggles for years without knowing why, versus a child who is identified early and told, your brain just works a little differently and here's how we're going to train it? Discuss the responsibility of schools and parents in this process. And now, my next question. In a world increasingly reliant on digital text and communication, what are the modern challenges and advantages for individuals with dyslexia? Think about both sides. On one hand, tools like spell check, grammar checkers, and text-to-speech software are more accessible than ever. On the other hand, so much of our social and professional lives are conducted through rapid-fire text, emails, and social media. Is technology a great equalizer, or does it create new forms of pressure? And my final question, reflecting on the speaking challenge, what is a powerful metaphor you have used or heard that successfully demystified a complex topic? Share your examples. It could be from any field, science, art, business, relationships, what have you. But the important thing is not just to remember the metaphor, I want you to remember what made it so effective. Now, discuss why metaphors are such a fundamental tool for human communication and learning, and how they can bridge gaps in understanding between people. All right, and just like that, my friends, our journey through the reading brain comes to a close for today. Now, we've seen that dyslexia is not a flaw, but a fascinating difference in neurological design, a testament to the brain's complexity and its incredible capacity for adaptation. I hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity and perhaps given you a new lens through which to view learning and cognition. And remember, this is just the beginning. True knowledge is a journey, and you've just taken a very important first step, if you're still listening, of course. Now, if you want to continue this journey with me, I invite you to become part of the English Plus ecosystem. You will find transcripts for our episodes, focus on language breakdowns, let's discuss questions, a lot of articles about a variety of topics with language-focused sections in them, all on our website at EnglishPlusPodcast.com. And if you're hungry for more, you can unlock our entire library of podcast episodes by subscribing to English Plus Premium on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon. Your support helps me keep creating this content for learners and curious minds everywhere. And for those of you who want to dive even deeper, I also have my all-access tier on Patreon. Well, that gives you not only every podcast episode, but also complete access to all my premium audio series and language courses. And as a personal note, it also gives you a front row seat to my own creative work, including my music and my writing. It is the ultimate way to support everything I do here, and I'd be honored to have you as part of this inner circle. Well, thank you very much for lending me your time and your curiosity today. Until next time, keep learning, stay curious, and keep the conversation going. I'm Danny. This is English Plus Podcast. Remember, never stop learning. I'll see you next time.